Alright everyone, we start off today talking about that juror on the Chauvin trial that clearly lied during the jury selection process, and unfortunately for the anti-Chauvin crowd that believe that, fentanyl Floyd didn't actually overdose, which is the actual cause of death, unfortunately this means probably that the verdict will be voided, and at the very least he'll get a new trial. Whether they even are able to try him, though, at this point is not necessarily a sure thing, because you've got any possible jury that you could have is tainted by what Maxine Waters said, by what Biden said, also if you attempt to retry him, as well as the fact that there was a gross miscarriage of justice in this sense because of this juror, whose name was Brandon Mitchell, and I'll get into that. First and foremost, though, if you're watching this video on YouTube, there will be a pinned comment down below, as well as links in the description of the video, as always, with links to 4 other video hosting sites that I upload everything on. Keep in mind, I make 4 videos a day, but only 2 go on YouTube. Sometimes it's due to the content. A lot of things now are verboten on YouTube. Certain opinions, certain topics you're not allowed to talk about. You have to silence yourself to be a YouTuber, which is why I'm just a content creator now. And also the algorithms, really, they don't favor you. If you're an independent content creator, if you don't have a contract that has at least 5 zeros in it, trust me, YouTube is demoting your content. Basically, that's the long and short of it. Fucking David Firth, Salad Fingers and so forth the other day, he got demonetized. He's having problems with the same thing. Cooking channels are having problems breaking through the algorithm. You're competing with Rachel Ray. Guess who's going to be first in the results for your jalapeno poppers? Anyway, Brandon Mitchell was one of the jurors that found Chauvin guilty on murder 2, murder 3, and manslaughter. During the jury selection process, the people that were to be comprising the jury were asked point blank, have you been going to rallies for BLM and so forth, political rallies? And BLM is a political movement. I know that people that support it don't call it political. It is. It is a money-making endeavor. It was initiated by people who self-proclaim themselves Marxists. It has a clear-cut, fairly obvious political bent to it. You can consider that virtuous. You can say, well, they're fighting for the right side. Okay, that's fine. That doesn't mean they're apolitical. Let's be reasonable about this and just call a spade with regards to their obvious political leanings. Now, he was asked about this, and he said no. Had he not said no, he would not have been selected during the jury selection process. During that process, there was vetting going on. Keep in mind, the prosecution and the defense both have the ability to essentially veto potential jurors. And they convened 12 jurors and 2 alternates, in case, I believe, of illness and shit. These people are only sequestered at the last minute, which sets up another problem with regards to trying to retry him, as I'll get into. The problem is that he had gone to a BLM rally. He arguably perjured himself. He lied to the defense, he lied to the prosecution, and was chosen as a juror, and he shouldn't have been. Now, I posed this question because NPR tweeted about it, and there were a bunch of people saying, well, why does it matter? This is just white supremacy. And I pointed out, let's flip the tables. Now, keep in mind, this isn't an opposite situation. This is the same except for the race of the individuals. Keep in mind that if you're assuming that this is an opposite situation from what apparently happened with the Chauvin trial, you're brainwashed. The MSM has gotten to you. Imagine that this were a person on trial, a black person, who allegedly murder 2, they killed a white person. Whether they're a cop or not doesn't matter. And someone is selected for the jury, and one of the questions is, have you ever gone to a MAGA rally? Have you ever gone to a Tea Party rally? Something along those lines, and they say no. And then it later turns out after a guilty verdict that they had. You would be screaming for a mistrial. You'd be screaming for it to be retried, and you would be correct to do so because at least one of the jurors in that pool was tainted and should not have been there. The legal process is very, very meticulous about such things. If anything goes wrong, there can be a retrial. Any little thing that can happen. One piece of evidence was mishandled. One lie was told. One breach of some arcane rule that might be from the 19th century, and you can potentially use that as a grounds to void the verdict and retry. Now, the problem with the retrial boils down to this. Not only is this a grounds, potentially, and he's already appealed, Chauvin, you also have Maxine Waters arguably attempting to intimidate the jury. Now, you can say it's not actually incitement, she didn't really intimidate them. Very well. Again, the law is very meticulous, and a lot of it is also up to the judge. It's very subjective. A judge could find, yeah, well, the comments prejudiced the jury. They were essentially told that people would be rioting in the streets if they didn't return a guilty verdict. Ergo, these people voted in their own self-interest on the jury. Also, keep in mind, while the jury here in this trial was sequestered when Biden came out and said, well, we finally got justice, this was the right decision, the new jury on a retrial wouldn't have been. That's a real goddamn problem. If the President of the United States has glowingly praised the idea of you being guilty, is it possible to convene any jury in the United States, anywhere, regardless of where you move the trial to, unless it's out in the middle of literally nowhere in a place that doesn't have cable access? Is there any possibility of having an untainted jury pool? No. There's not. Now, you can make, of course, you can make the very funny argument, well, no one listens to Biden. Nobody even knows what he says because they don't tune in. Okay, you could reasonably make that argument, but unfortunately, I don't think it would hold legal muster. Now, for those who believe that Chauvin is an evil racist, guilty as sin, he was being malevolent, he just wanted to whack a black man, which is, of course, not even something the prosecution is arguing in that particular case, then you probably look at this and you say, well, this is the system. If the roles were reversed, they would never do this. Well, actually, there have been instances of such appeals. It doesn't matter what race it is. If you had the shoes on the other foot situation and a black defendant, the ACLU and the NAACP and the SPLC and BLM and all these groups would be protesting on behalf of the person who was being defended, demanding a retrial. That's the long and short of it. And this is how we know that these are politically motivated stances. Because it's a dichotomy. It's sort of an us and them mentality with regards to this, despite the fact that the situations are basically identical with the exception of the amount of color in the person's skin. And that's the way that U.S. politics is unfortunately working right now. It's idpol. It has nothing to do with the legal system, and a lot of people are weighing in, they're saying, well, Chauvin won't get a retrial or something. It's very likely he gets a retrial. Again, you've got to understand the gravity of this particular situation. This individual was photographed wearing a BLM shirt. Now, they were asked point blank, do you support BLM? No, I don't really have any particular leanings on that. You lied. If anything, Brandon Mitchell should be in a cell right now for lying during the jury selection process, for perjuring himself. He should be tried for that. And Chauvin, meanwhile, should be free, pending his appeal. I think he is actually, at the moment, still out and about. He's probably in a house arrest or something. Correct me if I'm wrong. And on appeal, any competent judge is going to throw out the initial verdict and say, yeah, there has to be a retrial, but unfortunately, the president decided to mouth off. Politicians should shut the fuck up about these cases for this reason. If Joe Beijing Biden or crazy granny Maxine Waters really think that Derekchauvin is that problematic, evil, racist, despicable, and the sign of everything wrong, don't say anything because of the possibility that something goes wrong in the decorum of the legal process and you have to have a retrial. Maxine Waters and Joe Biden may have ensured that Derekchauvin can't even be retried because there's no possibility, no reasonable person would suspect that anyone in such a high-profile, notorious case, that's the litmus test here, is going to be able to get a fair trial. Everyone in the United States has either decided, yes, Derekchauvin is a racist killer, he's a murderer and a piece of shit, or he's innocent, he got railroaded, and by the way, everything's tainted to hell, and you know, we need to stay in the street. So, I guess if Chauvin's appeal is rejected, and disclaimer, of course, this is literally a Maxine Waters quote, so keep in mind this is coming from the left, I guess everyone should stay in the streets and get more confrontational. And they should fight for justice, and you know, but here's the thing. Nobody worries about the pro-Chauvin crowd or about the right wing or anyone outside of the left burning Wendy's because the verdict went wrong. This is one reason this sort of kangaroo court thing keeps happening, because there's no real physical, tangible pushback from the other side. And there's no side to be had. This is an issue of the rights of the accused. Chauvin's rights were violated. You can even think, by the way, you can think he's guilty as sin. But his rights were still violated, and that's a problem in the legal system. The justice has to be blind. If we don't have that, then we might as well throw out the amendments related to the rights of the accused. Speedy and fair trial? Yeah, fuck that. We're obviously not going to get that in the internet era. Look at the O.J. Simpson case. Potentially a slightly bad example because some of the jurors have literally alluded to punishing white people for the Rodney King beating, basically, with the verdict, but If I were on the OJ jury, I would have found him not guilty too. Because looking at the evidence, it was all tainted. It doesn't matter that we know that he was guilty. It's pretty goddamn fucking obvious that he was. It's pretty obvious that OJ killed two individuals in cold blood, and that's the case. But if you don't have any evidence that you can actually admit because it's all been completely mishandled, if the investigation from front to back has been bungled, if you have the glove don't fit moment because the prosecution is so fucking stupid they don't realize that leather shrinks when it's exposed to moisture, if you've got all of these things, what are you supposed to do? Justice has to be blind. You can't just say, well, I know him to be guilty, so I'm voting for him to be guilty. That's basically what several of the jurors have said about Chauvin. Well, he looked guilty. He seemed guilty to me. Fuck the evidence and everything like that. He's obviously a racist, obviously an evildoer. You have a BLM enthusiast sitting in the jury pool. It's a mistrial. And it should be. Now, will that happen? In today's lynch mob mentality of the social justice left, it's not entirely clear. A judge might punt the case and the judges might say, well, we're not going to hear the appeal. The judges say, no, we're not going to retry because they made their decision. Yeah, there were some problems there, but we don't think, here's the punt. We don't think that the jury was prejudiced by Maxine Waters intimidating them. We don't think the jury was prejudiced despite one of the jurors openly lying about BLM aficionado status during the jury selection process. That is possibly what will happen. However, if it was unlikely before that there would be an appeal and a retrial or and the lack of a retrial potentially because of Waters' comments, now it's more likely, and the likelihood of them getting the ability to retry him and not having a judge say, how am I supposed to retry an individual who can't possibly get a fair trial, thus violating the Constitution, that would go before SCOTUS. This is going to drag on for a long time, and it's the fault of people on the left. It's the fault of a BLM enthusiast that sat on the jury, knowing full well he was lying, for which, again, he should be in a cell. He should be prosecuted for that. Maxine Waters, who's off her rocker and has said violent and inciting things before, and Joe Biden for opining at all. The President of the United States should not be talking about active, ongoing legal cases. This is why Trump very wisely didn't say anything about Rittenhouse. If he had come out and said, and I disavow Kyle Rittenhouse, he would have been handing him a not guilty verdict. A mistrial would have been declared immediately because no jury had been convened. If the president weighs in on a case, you should automatically not be able to be prosecuted. There should be a constitutional amendment with regards to the decorum and behavior of public officials that are notable enough to potentially sway a jury pool. That should probably be a constitutional amendment so that they shut up and this sort of bullshit stops happening. That's about all. Peace out.